Hi everyone, this is a tutorial to show you how to go about picking up your underarm stitches. So here I have worked the body of a jumper. This happens to be Whispering Fields, and I've returned my sleeve stitches from scrap yarn back onto a cable, and I'm ready to pick up along my underarm seam to start working the sleeves. I'm going to show you a few different options here because it can vary depending on the pattern that you're working. The most straightforward option is if you are just working with a main colour and you're picking up the same number of stitches as you have along your underarm seam that you cast on for the body. So if that's the case, the way I like to work it is by just going through the middle of each stitch column and picking up the yarn as I go. So to do that, you'll pop your needle. I'm working with my right needle here. So pick up by going through the middle of the stitch, and then you get your yarn, loop for the first one around that needle. There, you've picked up one stitch. So needle goes through the middle of the next stitch, loop your yarn around. This is called picking up and knitting. That's 2 stitches picked up, and you'd work like that along each stitch of that underarm cast on until you'd picked up all the stitches you needed. You may also place a marker, probably somewhere halfway along, but not necessarily, but somewhere along there you might be placing a marker to indicate where your beginning of round is starting. Okay, so that's the most straightforward option. Now, if you're working with colour work, it might be that you're picking up with 2 colours. Now, in my patterns, what I like to do is to tell you to pick up a certain number of stitches just with main colour, like this. Then you'll place your beginning of round marker, and then you'll continue to pick up the stitches that you need, but working then with 2 colours. So then you'd be still picking up, let's say, a main colour. Let's say the next one is a contrast colour. So this is where you get your contrast colour, and you'd pick up, if I can find the start, there it is. And then you'd pick up the next one with a contrast colour. Let's say the next one is main colour, and you'd keep working like that, following the chart as the pattern instructs you to. Whatever chart row that might be is different, obviously, depending on what pattern you're following. So then you'd keep picking up until you reach the live stitches. Then you continue knitting those as the pattern instructed. Okay, one more thing to say. In some of my patterns, there is what's called a sleeve extension. So if you are working a sleeve extension, then you need to pick up more stitches than you actually have along your underarm edge. And the way I recommend that you do that is by picking up a few stitches around the corner of your sleeve here, just maybe 2, 3 or 4, and then pick up some extra stitches along your underarm edge as well. So for example, you might like to pick up a stitch here. What I would always recommend is don't go for stitches that are obviously loose already, because picking up into those stitches is actually just going to increase the size of that hole and make the slight looseness even more apparent. So if anything, go in between stitches and go for through the middle of a stitch that already looks quite tight. So here, for example, I'll pick up 1, let's say 2, and I'll go in there. That looks quite small. 3. So I've picked up 3 extra stitches before reaching the first stitch of my underarm cast on, which is there. And then as you're picking up stitches along the underarm cast on, you can pick up, as before, through the middle of each stitch, but then to get the extra stitches you need, you can also pick up in between some stitches. So I'll just come closer to show you that. So there I've picked up into the middle of that stitch. The next stitch that I would be picking up into is here. What I want to do is pick up in between as well. So you pop your needle in between the stitches and then also through the middle of that next stitch. So there you just picked up an extra stitch to achieve the stitch count that you need for the sleeves. If you do that a few times along your underarm edge, that will help you to get enough stitches, but in a kind of fairly invisible way. Okay, I hope that's helpful.